Welcome back. We carry on. Okay, so this is Bulls and Bears, still kind of part of paper review, but we're switching gears now because we want to focus on matters economics of retirement. Now, a study which was released this year, which covered about 65,000 retirement scheme members, showed that retirement savings of Kenyans are able to support a replacement of only 34% of their last earnings in retirement compared to the desired target, which is 75%. What am I trying to say in a nutshell? Majority of Kenyans will unfortunately retire into poverty if that data is to be believed. Nevertheless, on the other hand, Honorable Jagua comes up with this proposal that hit the age of 50 in the civil service and you should go home to pave way for a younger generation that are crying out, where are the jobs? And this is a discussion, Trevor, we've had a couple of times this year. Where are the jobs? But young people are saying the jobs are with people who have refused to go home. So it's a mixed bag, but basically the economics of retirement and its effect on the economy is what we want to take a look at this moment. Let me briefly introduce our guests who are here with us. I'll start from their right, Sundeep Raichura, who's the CEO, Zamara Actuaries, Administrators and Consultants. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. David Osiani carries on with us. He's a public policy analyst. We also have, obviously, Honorable Kipruto Rapkirwa, a former cabinet minister who carries on with this particular discussion. We have Agnes Ibara, who's a women and youth advocate, a politician as well, and she'll help us understand that particular proposal by Honorable Jagua. And in our Studio B, we have Carol Muthama, who is a retirement coach. We'll be talking to her shortly as well. Carol, we trust you can hear us.
I can hear you.
Great. We'll come to you shortly. All right, Agnes, let's get straight into it. This proposal in the paper last week, I can tell you we discussed it last week, Wednesday or Thursday here, and we have received all manner of feedback. In a nutshell, what does the proposal call for, and what sort of feedback have you received?
Thank you, Wahiga. The proposal, I would start by saying, was influenced by the unemployment rate that Kenya is dealing with right now. I would start by first pointing out that Kenya is a young generation, and I think what pushed Honorable Jagua to come up with such a proposal, he looked at the numbers and saw the rate of unemployment within the youth. Most Kenyans don't know that Kenya is comprised of 75% young people, people who are between the ages of 0 to 35. And we have an active economic demographic that is only 22 million. And shockingly, 85% of our economic active population are youth who are unemployed. So over and above all other avenues that government uses, we are talking about the blue-collar jobs, we're talking about technical skills, we're talking about digital skills, we're talking about social entrepreneurship. But when we look at Article 55, that really pushes for the involvement of government when it comes to affirmative actions to help any disadvantaged group, we find that only the government can create this opportunity for youth. And we see an avenue where if everyone is retired after the age of 50, we would have over 200,000 positions that youth would take up. This is after the fact that the government froze employment, which broke the chain of young people being absorbed into civil service. But right now we have 31% of the workforce in civil service. This is a whole entire workforce in government ministries, government corporations and parastatals. We have the TSC. And we have county governments. We have an aging workforce, over 24% that is exiting service. We have already 40,000 who have exited, and we have 20,000 who are exiting this year. So this is an avenue where young people can be absorbed into civil service.
But are we looking at old age poverty here? Because there's so many aspects of that bill. Many say it's actually a populist bill, because you just mentioned you'll get only 200,000 jobs. There are millions of youth who are unemployed, and then the pension bill is skyrocketing. It's about 110 billion as we speak. The 40,000 who you said have retired have not even received their money just yet. So isn't it counterproductive?
I like that Wahiga brought up the issue of income replacement. Kenya is dealing with an income replacement ratio of about 34%. We need to be where the developed countries are right now at 84. What I'm saying, Trevor, is if I've been earning 60,000 shillings as a civil servant, when I retire, I'll be getting about 20,000. And I think what we need to do right now is first incentivize our income replacement ratio so that we can encourage more people to exit service. The second thing, Kenya is struggling with a pension system that is not contributory, if we push for a contributory pension scheme that allows people to mark my retirement, like I'm joining civil service at the age of 20 and I want to leave by 40, I should have a choice of either saying, instead of giving only 6% or the 7.5% right now, I should maybe be allowed to give 30% so that my replacement, my income replacement might be higher as I leave service.
Okay. Let me bring in Sundeep on this, and you deal a lot with pension. Is early exit the solution?
Look, this is a very interesting debate, right? And I guess, there's different views as the presenter has just mentioned. But, I feel that the proposal is well intended, but its effects are going to be counterproductive. And also there's going to be some very significant negative effects of the proposal, because you're talking about asking every civil servant or every public service employee who is above 50, asking the person to retire, right? Now, the number of jobs you're going to create there is less than 200,000 jobs, right? And as has just been pointed out, there are millions of youth in unemployment. I mean, it's not really going to make a dent. I mean, it's trying to say that one has got I think the real issue is that one has got a stomach ache, but you're trying to treat a headache, right? Because it's the wrong solution, right? And in terms of pensions, the ramifications are very massive. Because here you're saying that to a government that is already strained, paying 100 billion, and this amount is increased, remember, from 1 billion in the year 1999 to 110 billion now. The rate of increase is so fast, right? And it's actually exponential. Now, if you do this, you are going to increase that expenditure from 100 to 200 billion. Government resources that should go to other areas like developing our economy will be going towards pensions. And so it's not the right solution. And just you talked about the government pensions and the government pension system being non-contributory. And I think it's very important to talk about this unfunded civil service scheme that we have, because no money is being set aside. We are seeing a skyrocket in expenditure. But the other thing that we're all overlooking is that there is an unfunded liability, pension liability, which is when I think Sarah Serem, the then CEO, the chairperson of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, mentioned that the total liability some years back was 1 trillion shillings. My estimation is that this amount will have increased. And if you adopt the proposal, the government's pension liability will increase by another 60%. So the 1.2 to 1.3 trillion pension liability will become 2 trillion. The pension liability that is currently 20% of our GDP will increase to 40% of our GDP. It's not something. So I'm saying that the ramifications of this compared to the benefit that it will achieve. And that is why my suggestion is that, the government should focus on those areas that will stimulate the economy and create jobs. Right? It's reducing government expenditure. It's providing access to finance to the businesses that need finance. Those are the right solutions. This is a very short-termist, populist, but it's not going to achieve.
And we'll give you a chance to respond to that. But Sundeep, tell me this.
Yes.
We've spent the better part, not even this year, over the last couple of years, talking about an unemployment crisis.
Yes.
On the other end, in retirement,
yes,
do you foresee a retirement crisis? And let me tell you this. So a research project carried out in South Africa showed that pension schemes aren't working on this continent because when people retire in Europe, the assumption is that their children will have grown and been educated, the house has been paid off, cars paid up, and that sort of thing. But in Africa, on the African continent, you have obligations from your relatives up country and so many other things that your pension does not factor.
So old age poverty.
Are people safe moving forward into retirement?
I really believe that the old age crisis in Kenya, and indeed many other countries in Africa, is going to be enormous, right? I mean, Africa is the fastest aging continent in the world, even though we have a very young population. Now, if I take Kenya, for example, in the next 20 years, say 2050, in the next 30 years, we will have about 10 million Kenyans above the retirement age. Right? The cost of providing even a very modest benefit to them is going to be about 333 billion shillings in current money terms, right? Unless something is done about this, right, old age poverty is going to be the biggest contributor to an increase in poverty levels in our country. And it's a crisis. And, you talked about this statistic of 34%. Now, this is a study that Zamara undertook some years back. So, in fact, last year. Now, What this is saying is that most Kenyans, even those who are lucky enough to belong to a pension scheme, are actually sleepwalking to disaster without even knowing it, right? And even these many public service employees, right? Yes, they have a very generous non-contributory pension, but capping their retirement age to 50 is going to significantly impact on their ability to be able to retain, to be able to be comfortable in their retirement when they're compulsorily sent home, if this proposal goes through.
If it goes through. Okay, Carol Mudhama is also with us. We'll allow her to weigh in shortly on this, but David is waiting to jump in.
No, because I think the proposal must not have been well researched. Because countries that have the oldest retirement ages, Norway, Iceland, 67, have the lowest unemployment rates.
But they're dealing with...
No, wait a minute. We have countries like China who have an earlier retirement age than Kenya and still handling a crisis, as it were. As Sundeep says, you see, the problem we have here is first, we have the suboptimal contribution into our retirement scheme, all right? So we only have NSSF. And when the older people retire, the first thing they do is they want to take the highest cash limit allowable and accessible to them. So when you're told at the age of retirement, you will get 5 million, rather than saying, okay, I'll take 2 million and leave the 3 million to sustain me for the future years, you go for the highest amount you can access. And when you do that, what's the next thing they end up doing? They go and buy their dream car, or they decide we are going to try and start business. And business needs patience. So it's to understand the dynamics around any business first, you need about 5 years. So within 3 years, the money they plowed into business has dried up. We have a crisis. So the solution to this is not about getting us to retire. 200,000 people employed is going to be less than 2% of the population, or less than 10% of what we need to get into jobs to sustain this country. You can do that. And you cannot look at government as the only place where we can all be employed. That is why policies need to be... We have enough policies. We just need to have them effected to create an environment where businesses can thrive and offer employment to the younger people. If you get out 200,000 people today, if you are going to have 200,000 people retiring, the director of economics at the Ministry of Treasury, for example, he retires.
Who will take
Is a youth of 25-year-old going to take over that role? Absolutely not. They are going to promote the next person in line because of one, institutional memory, and secondly, because of the in-depth understanding of the dynamics in these institutions.
And Agnes, that's a question we've had quite a bit.
So those are not the solutions, the prescription and solutions. They are a mismatch of sorts.
Kiproto, what do you make of this conversation?
Well, I'm not
now you
about
on the other side.
I'm not about to retire. But I think the discussion is very healthy. But we should begin by rationalization of the stuff that we have as government. Because what I see, even with the advent of devolution, there is some job duplication in many aspects. So we should begin by rationalizing the people that we need, doing serious audit about county governments and also the national government. Once we have done that, we should effectively have a clear succession plan, so that if you are retiring 200,000 people, at what level are you retiring them? Is it at the top or even in lower cadres, upon rationalization of the staff that you may require? So that the entry of the new people is also going to be seamless. Number three, I just want to concur with what David has just said. We should allow the government first to stop wastage. We waste almost a third of the budget every year since independence. And therefore, if you are to reduce wastage, then there will be more money to be released to certain sectors of the economy that can stimulate growth, including the private sector. Because when we talk of employment, it's not just the government as the main employer. There are many more people who are employed outside government if there is effective investment in the private sector. Number three, we need to think of the cost of money and the cost of doing business. If we were to reduce the cost of doing business, it will mean that many businesses will expand, and that expansion will allow many people to be employed. And those who have retired will get something out of it. More important is the issue that you know, on the rule of the thumb, the way Agnes has said, is possibly if you are earning 60,000, you will earn 20,000 when you retire. In some cases, it may be even 10,000, depending on the kind of scheme you are in. I remember during the time I was minister, the late Miraria told me he retired as a PS. He was earning 17,000 out of his retirement. And he told me where he was living in Karen, the bill for electricity was over 20,000. It effectively meant if he had not come to parliament, he was not going to sustain electricity bill. He would have been forced to go home, sell the house, pretend to be doing farming in Meru, and that farming would have collapsed after 5 years, the way Oceania said. Because you cannot be a civil servant for so many years and you pretend the last days of your life you are going to be a very serious farmer. Yes. Serious farming is started by people who are of certain age and they learn through the ropes. And therefore they create more jobs by being there.
By being there.
So
hang on, because I want to bring in Carol Mudhama, who's a retirement coach who's in our studio B. Carol, I'm sure you've been following this conversation, and even as you respond to what some of the panelists here have had to say, how does a government prepare for an aging population with a bulging youth bracket as well? Just give us your thoughts on this.
My thoughts are that the policies that the government puts in place needs to be stimulating to the economy, because as the other panelists have said, releasing 200,000 people from public service to employ younger people, 200,000 is just a very small percentage of the youth that need employment. And so it's really about reducing the wastage, as the Honorable Kipruto Kiru has said, so that there is stimulation in the economy, so that the existing businesses can be able to expand and absorb more workforce, and so that these young people can be able to start earning. And from that point, when there is some income, then we can be able to start planning for retirement. The thing that happens with a lot of workers is that they wake up to the realization that they are getting older and they need to plan for retirement when it is a little bit too late. Essentially, retirement planning should start when somebody starts working. And it should not be that, you know, where we are talking about the 7.5% or 6% contributory pension contributions. There needs to be some supplementation, because ideally 20% of an individual's income should go into long-term savings that will enable safety and security when retirement happens. That is my view.
Now, what are the retirement challenges that no one warns you about? Because if Agnes Ibara's proposal is to be believed, a lot of people who need to start thinking about things like that. But from what you're saying, everybody, even on this table, should be thinking about things like that. What are the retirement challenges you would say nobody warns you about in your experience?
Healthcare is a big issue during retirement. So it's important for somebody to plan for things like insurance. You know, insurance is really supposed to come in to help on some of these things. So healthcare is a challenge. Even as the Honorable Kipruto Kiru has said, bills, you know, essential expenditure. And so these are the challenges that a lot of retirees have got to face on a daily basis. And it's basically because there was no forethought, there was no building a fund that would be sufficient on a passive way to be able to sort of offset some of these expenses that are there during retirement.
Right. Thanks, Carol. Yes, we'll be back with you in just a bit. We have to take a quick break here on Daybreak. When we come back, we are now talking about the other extreme end. What are some of the mistakes Kenyans are making in not planning for the retirement? And it's actually just come up right now.
She's itching to respond.
Agnes will also respond to this issue, but we'd also like to hear your views on 22422 at Trevor Mbija, at Citizen TV Kenya, at Waiga Moura, #Daybreak. We want to know what are some of the social safety nets that are needed to shelter the vulnerable in the society. And also, let's just hear your thoughts about planning for retirement and whether you have already started planning for retirement and at what age, and whether this lowering of the age will work or not. Just your general thoughts on this conversation on retirement. We'll be back in just a bit, taking a short break here on Daybreak.